Welcome to the messy middle of entrepreneurship, unfiltered and unapologetic. Uncensored Entrepreneurs, hosted by Star Codd, Robert Wall, and Tina Torres-Wilson, brings you real stories from the trenches of building a business. Those late nights, hard lessons, big wins, and everything in between. This is where the truth about entrepreneurship lives. No fluff, no filters, just raw, honest conversations with founders who have lived it. So, if you're over the highlight reel and you're ready for the real deal, hit play. You can build an impressive career and still be falling apart deep inside. Today's guest knows that firsthand. Lulu Essey spent 3 decades winning awards, working with global brands like Porsche, BMW, Google across 4 continents, all while battling severe bipolar disorder and other things in life that tend to hold us back. From the outside, it looked like success. On the inside, it felt like survival. Now, as a speaker, a mindset advisor, and the host of the Lulu Essey Podcast, she helps driven professionals stop building on quicksand and start building success. Success that actually feels good and lasts. Lulu, welcome to Uncensored Entrepreneurs.
Oh, Robert, I really appreciate being here. So thank you. And I also want to say thank you to your listeners and to everyone who's tuned into this episode, because what it tells me is that everyone who's tuned in is not willing to settle, wants something more, is searching, and I have huge respect and admiration for that. So thank you to all the listeners who will be hearing this message.
Yes. We're so excited to have you on with us today, Lulu. And we're missing one of our co-hosts, Tina. So unfortunately, she won't be with us today, but hopefully you'll be able to connect with her soon. And we're just going to go straight in and get to know a little bit more about your journey and supporting our audience with what it is that you succeed in. So we know that there's a paradox when it comes to success on the outside and chaos on the inside. So when you personally look back at the decades of work that you did with global brands, and we know that you were successful, what was really happening internally that people couldn't see?
Thank you, Star. So yes, and it's interesting that you used the word paradox because I actually name it the success paradox. As Robert said in the introduction, from the outside, everything looked so good. I was climbing my career, I was winning awards, I was working for brands that are globally recognized. But what people didn't see is that underneath all of that, there was a real profound self-hatred. I don't use the word hatred lightly, manifested as self-harm. And at the same time, I was battling severe bipolar. And that's something I never allowed people to see because I felt that if they saw that, it would at best jeopardize my career and that people would never look at me the same again and always have that doubt in the back of their minds. So the accolades kept coming, the clients kept coming. I was working on different continents. But what wasn't changing was how I felt inside, and it was actually getting worse. So, unlike a lot of people that have an epiphany moment, like that light bulb moment, I didn't have that. It was a progression and a series of moments that made me realize that I had it all backwards. I was focusing on that external validation. And I thought once I gathered all these things outside of me, that I'd finally feel worth it, that I'd finally love myself. And that was the beginning of my realization that I call it an inside job. And it really is. And even in business, as entrepreneurs, it's all an inside job.
That is so true. First of all, in parallel, I think many of us, whether it's in your particular instance, it was hiding being bipolar from the world, but each and every one of us, we have something that we're dealing with. When you were telling your story, I was actually immediately transplanted back in time when I was going through some traumas in life. And I felt that here I am as a coach, as a leader, as a father, quite frankly, that has to show up for others, that because I was in a broken state, that I didn't qualify to be able to continue to serve others. And so I stepped away from some of those roles as a coach and as a leader because I felt in my broken state, I just wasn't worthy. And when I reflect back on that, it's through those things that actually make us the most qualified to help others. And so when you mentioned that just now, I was thinking about there are so many other people with bipolar disorder, and I'm sure all this has come to fruition for you, but that need to hear your story, Lulu, right? They need your message so that they too understand that they can still thrive and that they do not have to have this facade or to wear a mask in their day-to-day life and business.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. And there's a lot of nuance to what you said. So I think the first part of it for me is there's a moment where the trauma hits that you do need to go inside. You can't start sharing immediately. But when you start to emerge, and I think as entrepreneurs, it's particularly marked for us. But as you said, what we perceive as our weaknesses can be our greatest sources of strength. And if we bring our full selves to our clients, to our work, they actually respect us more. Because the thing is, you're not positioning yourself as someone who's found the answer. Because who of us have found the answer? You're positioning yourself as someone like them who's facing the daily struggles. We're still human, but is managing to move through it. And I think that is so important because as coaches, as advisors, as consultants, as speakers, I think there is this tendency, well, at least there was for me in the beginning, that I need to have it all figured out. I'm not allowed to have setbacks. I'm not allowed to have a relapse. And that's so untrue because I'm human, just like everybody else. But the difference is how I move through it, not how I avoid it or how I fix it, but how do I move through it? So I wanted to bring that to the front. And the other thing was about the bipolar specifically. I think a lot of people out there, not just people who are bipolar, but who have some kind of mental health challenge, I think they stay away from entrepreneurship because the things that often happen in entrepreneurship are big triggers for people who have mental health issues, long hours, sustained stress, not having real downtime. What I'd like to say to listeners who are in that position and who are afraid is you're not going to change that overnight, but there is a way to make the both of them work in harmony. And it doesn't have to be an either or.
I love that, Lulu. And we're all going to experience some trauma, or there's going to be something that happens in life that just causes us to feel extremely overwhelmed. And you mentioned that when you were facing some difficulties, it just seemed to get worse and worse, right? And that oftentimes we don't see hope or a way out. But by dealing with the bipolar disorder, how has that shaped you in terms of your drive and ambition in your performance? How were you able to work your way through that and still be so successful?
So it's on so many levels. I think the first thing that I want to say is that I did things in combination. So I didn't just follow one path. I worked very closely with medical professionals, with my psychiatrists, with my therapists, but I learned tools and techniques to support myself. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. You can't outsource your well-being to a pill bottle. You can't outsource it to your doctor. That's only part of the equation, but you need to bring yourself to it. So I have daily practices and daily rituals that are non-negotiable for me. And they're simple, Star. It's around regular exercise. It's around sleep. It's around knowing when I need to turn off. And then I have practical techniques that I use to support myself. But you have to be willing to bring yourself to it and to do the work. And I think what also trips a lot of people up is they want a quick fix. We are a culture that's become so obsessed with hacks. Maybe for some people, hacks work. I think they're not sustainable. And you don't build that consistency and you don't keep proving to yourself that you can do this. People don't like to hear the word small steps because they want these big dramatic actions. But those aren't sustainable. I'm not saying that they can't have an impact. Sometimes a dramatic transformation is what happens, but it's the small, consistent steps that some days, many days, you just don't feel like doing. But you can't wait to feel like doing something to do it.
That is so true. I read a book, I think it's Jeff Olson, The Slighter Edge, right? The little steps that you need to take. And we all just immediately want that result. I want to lose weight. I want to take a shot or I want to take a pill and I want that overnight success, but it all comes with a cost, right? And then I also thought about when you were stating that the cliff notes, cramming during my college years. And how did I push through? Well, those cliff notes of books allowed me to just squeeze through, but there was no substance or to retain the message and to apply the work in that book in your life. It didn't come from cliff notes. You had to go through the work. So very true. You talk and you reference a great deal about quicksand, right? Entrepreneurs get in quicksand. You say that many professionals are building on quicksand. So what does that look like? If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Of course. So, Robert, what that means is outsourcing your worth to things that are outside of you. So, tying your worth to your bottom line, tying your worth to your revenue, to your KPIs, to did you win the client? Because business, you're going to have success and you're going to have things that are really challenging in your business. But if you're looking outside of yourself for that worth and that sense of validation, it's not sustainable and it's temporary. And that's the quicksand. But when you come from a place of enough, you come from a place of what I call self-love, that gives you the infrastructure for everything else. And that's what makes those things sustainable. And it gives you the emotional resilience.
We hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are. One thing we've learned through building our own businesses and from the stories we hear on this podcast is that podcasting can be one of the most powerful tools for growth, but only when it's done strategically. That's why we're such fans of So True. It's a podcast strategy and production agency that helps entrepreneurs create shows that lead to real results, audience growth, aligned leads, and increased sales. So, if you're thinking about starting a podcast or you want to get better results from the one that you already have, check them out at sotruemedia.com. That's sotruemedia.com. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Our worth is never tied to our revenue, and our worth is non-negotiable, whether we win the deal or we lose the deal. And it matters. Winning the deal, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. It does matter. But can you matter to yourself without the deal? That's the real question people are afraid to look at.
Definitely. For myself personally, when you have success for such an extended period of time, and then there's that shift, you don't naturally feel like, oh, I'm tying my self-worth to this revenue or the success that I'm having in business. But I found myself feeling that way in a place where I didn't realize that I did attach myself or my thoughts around my success to that. And when things shifted, I started to feel overwhelmed. I couldn't handle certain things that were happening in my life. And I started questioning my ability to serve and do other things in my other business because something was happening elsewhere. So, this is uncensored and we talk about all these things. So I love the strategies that you're sharing with us. I was telling someone the other day, I had a feeling of overwhelm and stress. And they said, well, what do you do when you're stressed out, Star? And I said, I don't know. And then I said, nothing. And they said, you're an entrepreneur. So you just naturally just let things go and just keep moving. And that's exactly how I've operated for so long. So I love that you're sharing these things.
Sorry, Star, I just want to reference something you said. You said the actual words, own your worth. And I have a love framework, and the letter O is own your worth. And that is so relevant in an environment where we're talking about entrepreneurship, because if you don't own that worth, you're doing the proposal, you're undercharging before anybody's even pushed back on the price. You're burning yourself out, you're over-delivering because you don't have that sense of worth and you're operating from scarcity.
Oh, Lulu, you give us a little bit. Now that we've broken into the love framework and we know what O is, do you mind expanding the rest of that for us?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you, Robert. So it's a framework that as entrepreneurs, we've all invested in strategy frameworks, sales frameworks, marketing frameworks. But how many of us have a framework for the relationship that determines how we show up in all of those areas? And that relationship is the relationship with ourselves. And before anyone cringes at the word love, just stay with me for a second. So the first letter L stands for listen to your inner voice. And for entrepreneurs, this is about catching the voice that says, who are you to charge that? Or the voice that says, you're going to fail, just like everything else. But what listening is, and I really want people to hear this, it's not fixing that voice. It's not fighting the voice. The first step is just noticing it, because you can't change a conversation that you don't even know you're having. So become aware of that. And like I said earlier to start, how many of us have written the price on a proposal and then immediately discounted it before the client even said that's too much?
Yeah, so true.
Yes,
Wavering on that price point.
what's happening there is that inner voice that you're not listening to is running the show. So moving on to O, O is what I mentioned earlier, is own your worth. And this is about making your business decisions from I matter now, rather than I'll matter when I hit six figures, or I'll be worthy when I land that client. And I think as entrepreneurs, especially vulnerable to tying our worth to the revenue, the KPI, the ROI. But like I said to you, Robert, earlier, your worth is never conditional, ever. When you make decisions from that lack, it's very different decisions that when you feel that worth in your being, you stop undercharging, you stop over delivering, and you stop burning yourself out and trying to prove you deserve to be in the room because you know you deserve to be in that room. So the next letter is V, and that stands for value your journey. And I think entrepreneurs, we really suck at this piece. We're always looking for the next milestone and judging where we are against where we think we should be. Valuing your journey to me means celebrate the messy, imperfect steps. And you call it the messy middle here on Uncensored Entrepreneurs, and it's messy, but it's still worth celebrating. And I want to call something out to the listeners because I think this is helpful. When you find yourself in that place of, I'm terrible at this, I suck, I'm never going to get this right, I don't think that that's necessarily the time to reach for an affirmation, because you can't make a big leap from where you are, because all that will do is make you feel fake. It will feel like you're lying to yourself. But what you can do is go from, I'm terrible at this, to, I'm figuring this out. That mindset, that's real and that's sustainable. And I always say progress over perfection all the time. So don't go from I'm terrible to I'm an amazing entrepreneur. Just take the next step that you can. It's okay. I've done this before and I'm doing it again and I'll find a way. So that's what value your journey is about. And the last letter is, I think, maybe one of my favorite because I live this truly every day. And that's embrace imperfect action. And this is for all the entrepreneurs. Perfect action is not available because I've spent 30 years looking for it and I haven't found it because it doesn't exist. But imperfect action is always available to us, no matter where we are and no matter how bad things seem at the time. So launch the project, the proposal, the course before you feel ready. Send that email before you've rewritten it 12 times. And I'll give you a really practical example of this. My podcast is completely unedited, and I do that as a practice of this principle. And it's one of the most powerful things I can do. My episodes are very carefully researched, and there is a script behind them. But once I hit record, whatever happens stays in, because I need to feel like I'm living this stuff and not just out there teaching it. That's a framework that I think that you can use as an entrepreneur. And the other thing I wanted to say is, when I talk about self-love, what I've noticed is when I talk about it in a business setting, there's a smirk that comes over people's face and they almost recoil. And it's like, what has this got to do with my bottom line? So I started to shift my language and refer to it as being on your own team. And people can accept that. And it's exactly the same thing, but it's just using different language, because so many entrepreneurs I know, and I'm sure you know, are the most amazing team players and team members, but they're not on their own team.
So true. I think of the hero's journey, right? There really is no growth on that trend upward. The growth happens on all those little dips along the way. Every time we fall down, every time there's another obstacle in our path towards our growth in life and business. We talk about the messiness, but that's where everything happens. That's where change happens. I want to come back to this because you mentioned this word or the statement. How does self-hatred or self-rejection subtly show up in high performers? And the reason why this is so important is I'm guessing that many of our listeners are high performers. I know that Star and I are, just speaking for ourselves. And when we face some of these things, the self-hatred, it drives us crazy, right? It's all about perfection and having to continue to figure something out and how to achieve that goal. Would you like to expand a little bit more on the self-hatred in high performers?
Absolutely. And I think, Robert, self-hatred is on such a far end of the scale. So I'd like to think about the people listening. Maybe they're rejecting themselves because that feels more accessible to most, and self-hatred is quite an extreme. And constantly going for the next thing and not ever being satisfied with the deal that you've landed or the client that you've landed. What you're doing in that moment is a profound act of rejecting yourself. I refer to it as abandoning yourself. Do you stay with yourself and sit with your worth, even when it's uncomfortable, or you just say, "Oh, bugger it, I'm a loser, I'll never amount to anything," or "if I don't make that next target, it means I'm a really bad entrepreneur." So that's how it shows up, I think, for a lot of high performers. It's that restlessness. It's that disquiet, that never being satisfied. And people don't want to look at that. I want to draw on something here because I think when a lot of people hear this, they think, "Oh, that's soft. That's going to kill my goals." And I'm not saying that at all. Have that high revenue target, have those ambitions, but be grounded. Feel your worth now and keep reaching for more. And again, it's like I said in the beginning, it's not an either or. Why do we think things are so binary? Accepting yourself and loving yourself doesn't mean you all of a sudden slack off and forget about your ambitions. I'm an incredibly ambitious person, but I can do the same. I can hold two truths at the same time. And a technique that can help when you're feeling that sense of rejection. It's from the work of an amazing Dr. Susan David, and it's distinguish facts from feelings, because as entrepreneurs, we are very emotional. Everything is driven by ambition, what is ambition? It's an emotion. Separate the facts from the feelings. Our feelings don't always tell us the truth. If there's a situation, so and so didn't like that, or I think I messed up, or I think I charged too much, or I really buggered that meeting up, take out a piece of paper, take out your phone, write facts on one side and your feelings on this other side, and ask yourself, is that really a fact? Is that a provable fact in reality? I can guarantee you that 99% of the time, it's not a fact, it's a feeling.
You helped our audience so much with that, Lulu, and I'm glad that you broke it down the way that you did. I think for some of us who maybe we've had a certain level of success, we may not be negative inside to ourselves, but we are constantly looking for that next big rush. and really feeling that we're being ambitious and moving forward, and we're not stopping to take the time to take in exactly what's happening in that moment. And then you talked about a totally different topic that a lot of entrepreneurs face, myself included, where we're questioning things. Did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And then you're spinning yourself in this vicious cycle when, like you said, all you have to do is just look at the facts, and it's just our inner voice making us feel this way.
Completely. It's the story running in your mind. We so easily believe our own stories. Sometimes we need to just detangle and have a hard look and say, is this something I'm feeling and I'm making a story about it? Or is it real? Do I have proof that it's real?
I love that word detangle, by the way. It really is very descriptive to how many of us feel and what we should actually do. So, because the underlining thing, again, we hear this time and time again when we talk about mental health, things that we all have overcome, right? Things of our childhood forward comes in many different forms, things that we've overcome, triggers that we continue to have in life. And you even mentioned as an entrepreneur, we have many triggers, right? What is the cost of ignoring mental health when it comes to chasing scale? And what have you found in regards to that work?
I think the cost is profound, Robert, and it's so not worth it because it impacts you, but it also impacts every other relationship you have around you. And it's the crash and burn syndrome because we can't sustain this adrenaline rush, cortisol pulsing through our systems, lack of sleep. We can't sustain that. And then we crash and burn. We suffer, our business suffers, and our relationships suffer. Our teams suffer. So the cost is profound. And the more you ignore it, it's like pushing it away and pushing it away. It just compounds. It gets bigger. It's inevitable because your body will force you to take notice. You'll get sick. You'll come down with an illness. You'll have a breakdown. And the thing is, to come back from that is so hard. The climb back, it's not impossible, but it's really, really hard.
And so we know, Lulu, that you talked a little bit about your journey, and you've also shared some techniques that we can implement, which is very helpful. But what shifts did you personally make that changed how you built and led that we can also implement?
Okay, so I have a tip that might surprise people, and I call it honest naming. So when I'm feeling that sense of self-doubt or not being enough or I haven't got this right, I name that feeling out loud. So I say, I'm feeling like I failed at this, or I'm feeling overwhelmed. Now that might sound really simple, but bringing it into 3D reality allows you then to move away from it. Because what most people do, they skip that step. They want to go to immediately fixing it. They don't want to sit with the discomfort of actually naming what's happened. So when you name it out loud, honestly, then you can move to the next phase. And the next phase is what I call the next right thing. So what's the next right thing that you can do? Not the whole thing, but the next right thing, and make it really small. Because when you're in a place where you are doubting yourself, your nervous system is on very high alert. So anything that feels too big is going to set your nervous system alarm bells off. But if you take a small step, it flies under the radar of your nervous system. And then you start building a momentum. It's like, okay, I can do this. All right, let me take the next little step. But I said this earlier, people don't want to take that little step because they feel it's insignificant. It's everything.
I love that technique. I had a conversation with the client a few weeks ago, and one of the things they had brought up was that they felt, and we probably hear this from a lot of people, but they felt so overwhelmed because they had so much to get done. And so when I asked them, based on the 12 things they had on that list for the day, what did they end up doing? What did they get accomplished? And they actually said they were so overwhelmed, they ended up closing their scheduler and watching Netflix. So now I just want to bring that up as an example, not a plug for Netflix, by the way, but because of the fact that It's interesting how we all operate at some level where we're so overwhelmed, we have so much going on, and the crash and burn internally is, I'm just going to do nothing then, right? And so when you mentioned just now scaling it back and just that one thing, that one feeling, that one thing that you need to get done, that one thing to be able to accomplish, just breaking it down by the metric, right? That one little thing allows you to continue to move forward rather than it's so overwhelming I can't do any of it, right?
Yeah, completely, Robert. And that's where that all or nothing mindset comes in. I think as entrepreneurs, we think we need to have a magic wand that's going to fix everything. And so I'd rather do nothing than do something small because doing something small feels, nah, it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to move the needle. It does move the needle. And also what it does on another level. And again, it's about your relationship to yourself. You keep proving to yourself that you can keep your promises, that you can do what you said you were going to do, even if it's a small, small thing. And that gives you that momentum. And then you can do a slightly bigger thing and make it manageable. Set yourself up for success. Keep your promise to yourself because that is one of the big, big things is there is such power in keeping tiny promises. Don't make them big. Just make the promises tiny.
Yes. So thank you so much, Lulu, for all of the value that you've shared with us today. Can you let us know the best place for our audience to find you and connect with you?
Sure, Star. Well, I'd love your audience to come in and check out my podcast and find me there. I have a thought leadership piece that goes out every week on LinkedIn. And then, of course, I have a YouTube channel and all the relevant social media, and it all is Lulu Essey. So it's pretty straightforward. I'd love a visit. And I just want to say, even if this conversation made you uncomfortable, just sit with that a little bit and just explore. Don't judge yourself. That I'm a big proponent of don't judge because that just compounds the self-rejection. But just allow yourself to be uncomfortable. And maybe you can start opening the question as to why you're uncomfortable. And that could uncover some stuff for you.
Well, this was a very powerful conversation for our audience, and there's a lot of value that our audience will take away from this. I know Robert and myself as well will. We do hear a lot about what you said earlier on the show, the strategy, the marketing, but we don't talk about the mindset, the mental health as much as we should. So thank you so much.
Of course.
Absolutely. And we will make sure for those that are listening, please take a look at the comments. We'll make sure that all of your links and information is available in there for them, Lulu, so that they can connect with you directly. And we look forward to some further collaborations and even any other ways that we can serve you on your show with your audience as well.
Wonderful. Robert, Star, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delightful conversation and just a real privilege to be able to share with your community.
Likewise. Thank you again. And this is another episode of Uncensored Entrepreneurs. Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Entrepreneurs. If you're getting value from the show, take a minute to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you tune in. It helps more bold entrepreneurs find us. Until next time, keep showing up, uncensored and unapologetic. And we'll catch you on the next episode.